Okay, so good morning. We are continuing our discussion of what benefits Yaakov can derive from Esav when Esav makes a neder that prohibits Yaakov from benefiting from Esav. So again, Esav makes a neder, says, Yaakov, you cannot benefit from me at all. I'm making you, all my possessions are like a konam to you. So, and yesterday I said that we would begin today by discussing lending and borrowing. So let's just jump right in. So when it comes to, hamudar hana mechaver, when it comes to somebody who has been prohibited to benefit from his friend. So again, this is Yaakov that we're talking about. So then lo yashilenu. So now the question is the subject of this verb yashilenu referring to Yaakov or to Esav? And so it's a little confusing, and it seems like we'll see that based on the way the Gemara explains it, that we're talking about Esav here. So we're talking about hamudar hana mechavero is the nature of the situation, that Yaakov is prevented from benefiting from Esav. So lo yashilenu, Esav should not lend to Yaakov anything, below yishal mimenu, and he shouldn't borrow from him. Now, Gemara is going to ask, I can understand why you can't lend, why Esav can't lend to Yaakov, because if Yaakov borrows from Esav, presumably that's a benefit that Yaakov is getting from Esav, and Yaakov's not allowed to get benefit from Esav. But why can't he borrow? Why can't Esav borrow from Yaakov? Esav's is allowed to benefit from Yaakov. So what's the problem? So in addition, now that she'ela refers to borrowing things. So if I were, somebody got some stuff in here. If I were to borrow this mug, right? I wouldn't borrow it because there's stuff in it. But if I were to borrow this mug from somebody, so then I would. That would be she'ela. That would be borrowing in that sense. But we only have one word in English, but in Hebrew there are two words, and we're going to get the second word for borrowing, and that refers to borrowing money. Not only can he not borrow things, but and not lend things, but lo yalvenu v'lo yalvem mimenu. So again, Esav's not allowed to lend money to Yaakov. That makes total sense because Yaakov's not allowed to benefit from Esav.
There used to be a guy on One Life to Live named Esav.
Esav, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and lo yilvenu mimenu, and of course, and not only that, but he's not even allowed to borrow from Yaakov. And again, we'll see the explanation for that in the Gemara. Lo yimkorlo, he can't sell to Yaakov. V'lo yikach mimenu, and he can't buy from Yaakov. So both directions of lending and purchasing are prohibited pursuant to this Mishnah. So Bishlam Elo Yalvenu, it makes sense. The Gemara says that we're not allowed to benefit, that Esav's not allowed to lend to Yaakov because that's obviously going to benefit Yaakov, and Yaakov's not allowed to benefit from Esav. Elo Lo Yilvehemenu. Why? But when it comes to not borrowing from him, my Kamahanile, what benefit does the lender get? Okay. Now, Uvishlama. Now, one can make sense of lo yilvehimenu, that you can't borrow from that Esav can't borrow from Yaakov, below yikach himena, and not buy from him. Because there are methods, there are situations where one can benefit in that situation, and Tosfos guides us here and explains the two situations. That specifically, if I borrow from you and you give me old dollar bills that won't fit into a machine that no candy machine will take, and then when I pay you back, I give you bright and shiny new dollar bills or new dollar bill coins, well then you have benefited because I've effectively given you more usable money. And of course, as much as that is true today, it was even more true in those days when you had undefined coins, and to the extent that there was any kind of defect in them, people would be very suspicious and be less likely to accept it. So, and so that's with respect to lending money. So you can understand how when you lend money, if I pay you back, I'm not paying you back the same coins. That's not the way borrowing money works. Unlike if I were to borrow this mug from you, it does work that I'm giving you back the same thing. So it's not like I would borrow this mug and go get a new mug and give that back to you. That's not the way borrowing and lending works with respect to things. And so as a result, I can understand how I can benefit, how the lender can benefit when they lend money, but again, how does the lender benefit when he lends things? And not only that, when it comes to buying, Tosfos explains that, let's say we're talking about when the situation is that there are lots and lots of buyers. So then, then the buying doesn't really benefit the seller because he could find somebody else. But if there's only an average or less in terms of buyers, if we don't have, if the seller has to work to find a buyer, then that's a situation where the buyer is benefiting the seller. So those situations we can figure out. But lo yishal himenu, my kamitane. How can you set up any situation where a person borrows something and the other guy pays it back and it ends up being to the borrower's benefit? So I'm Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina. So we're going to offer two possible answers. For the first is Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina, and he says that when we said in our Mishnah, Hamuder Hanamechavero, it was essentially adding that not only did we have, because we've always been talking about Hamuder Hanamechavero. So we're adding another person. We're saying that there were two people that in both directions, Yaakov said he wasn't going to give benefit to Esav. Esav said he wasn't going to give benefit to Yaakov. And so as a result, that's why the lending and borrowing can't happen in either direction. That's answer number one. Answer number two, Abai Amar, Gzeira Lishol Mishum Lahashil. That the gzeira with respect to borrowing is because we're worried that he'll come to lend. That if we say that that Yaakov is allowed to lend to Esav, well then maybe Yaakov will end up borrowing from Esav, and that would be prohibited. And so too, when it comes to selling and comes to borrowing money, in all three situations, it's all because of a gzeira. It's not that we're worried about some unlikely situation, but rather we're worried that the natural situation will come about. Go ahead.
How is the Gemara distinguishing between borrower and lender here? I'm not quite sure of that.
So the borrower that we're talking about is, in our case, again, Esav has prohibited Yaakov from benefiting from him. So we're dealing with a situation where Esav is the borrower. So Esav is borrowing from Yaakov, but the lender is the person who's giving. Right, the lender is the person who's giving. Exactly. And so as a result, the problem is how does Yaakov gain any benefit? And so according to Abaye, no, Yaakov doesn't gain any benefit. This is just a gzeira. We're worried that if Yaakov lends, Yaakov will end up borrowing. Okay, so that's our first situation and the Gemara that's associated with it. And now we change to the next Mishnah, which builds on the lending concept and actually discusses a fascinating case of how we might come to be that Yaakov and Esav, that Esav has prohibited any benefits from Yaakov, or Yaakov that Esav has made this neder. So Amrlo, a guy says to his friend, his Shilani Paraska, come, let me borrow your cat. Sorry?
Question.
Yes,
It's interesting that you can conceive of a key benefit to lending money, which is in the case of lending to a non-Jew, let's say, and you charge interest. But the Gemara doesn't, or the Mishnah doesn't seem interested in that. Maybe it's like, everything is a chavero, but
well, I think
wouldn't that be a case where lending is?
Oh, absolutely, lending to a non-Jew would be a benefit, but because the fact situation is that we're talking about that the lending is happening to the person who made a neder that would prohibit the lender from benefiting from the person who made the neder.
So neder
We
doesn't
must
apply.
be talking about a Jewish person. We must be talking about a Jewish person, and because we have the prohibition about lending on interest to Jews, so that's why it cannot be, and that would be my suggestion as to why that couldn't be the answer here. We can't be talking about a situation where there's interest payment, because by definition, since the Esav character in my example is actually a Jewish person, he's just not a very good Jewish person, because you're not supposed to be making these nedarim, but he made this neder, and so because he's a Jewish person, so Yaakov cannot possibly benefit. The benefit cannot possibly be because of interest, because you're not allowed to charge another Jew interest.
However, either side can make the neder, right? Esav can forswear, can say,
but we're using, and I'm not sure why it chose to do this, but the Gemara clearly chose the words madir and mudar, meaning the object and the subject. And I reversed the order there. The mudar is the subject, the object, excuse me. The mudar is the object. The madir is the subject, meaning the one who made the neder. And they are distinguishing the two people, that the madir is, in my situation, Esav, and the mudar is Yaakov. The mudar is the one who is sort of the victim of the neder. And so because they've used that model, you're absolutely right. You could rejigger the model and say it's Yaakov, saying that he's not going to benefit from Chris. And then, of course, if Yaakov makes a neder that he's not going to benefit from Chris, then yes, in fact, we would have a situation where Yaakov could lend to Chris and charge interest, and that would absolutely be a benefit that Yaakov would be getting, and then it would be prohibited. So you're absolutely right that it's not impossible to set up the situation, but the way the Mishnah has set up the characters, both of them are clearly Jewish, because we are using the terms madir and mudar as referring to two different people. Okay, so now let's talk about this interesting case. So, Mark, I think you're going to like this case. So, Amar Lo, Hishilana Paraska, I come to you and I say, listen, I want to borrow your cow because I want to plow my field. And you say back to me, Amar Lo, Aina Panuya, my cow is busy plowing my field. That's what you tell me. You tell me it's not available. I can't do it. So Amar, I get really angry, and I say, Konam Sadisha Ani Chorish Bala Olam, that I am never going to use your cow because you were so mean to me and you didn't let me borrow your cow. I'm never going to use that cow to plow my field ever. So that's kind of crazy, right? So let's see what the Mishnah says. Im hayadarko lachrosh. Now, the important thing here in this case is that I said I'm not going to, that I'm not going to ever plow. So it's all about me. So im hayadarka lachrosh, if I'm the kind of guy who actually goes into my own field and does the plowing myself, well then, hu asar b'chol adam mutarim. I'm making that neder about me. It's not necessary, and about this cow, and not about anybody else. And so as a result, I'm prohibited. But chol adam mutarim, anybody else would be allowed to use Mark's cow and even plow my field. But the ain darko lachrosh, but if I'm not the one, if I always hire people to do my job and I'm not the one who does it, well then the implication is that I'm not talking about myself. I'm really talking about my field. And then in that case, hu v'chol adam asur, then anybody would be prohibited to use that cow. Okay, so that's an interesting situation that helps us, that flows from the past Mishnah, because it's talking about borrowing, and tells us a very clear rule that context matters. Context really matters when we make these oaths. You have to know all the facts and what the person's likely intention is, because the intention is what's key. Okay, back to our situation of people who can and cannot benefit. And now we're going to offer a few, what I would call cheats, if we can call it that. So, now, Esav has said that Yaakov cannot benefit from him, and now unfortunately Yaakov has nothing to eat. Holach etzel hachenbeni. So you know what Esav can do? He can go to the storekeeper. V'omer ish ploni mudar mimeni hana. This particular person has been prohibited to benefit from me, and so as a result, I'm going to just make sure I got this right. So even though again the in our printed Mishnayos and Gemaras, it says no there, but it's the mudar. It should be mudar there, and that's changed by the Hagos Habach. But in any event, so the mudar says, look, the person Yaakov is subject to this neder, and he's not allowed to benefit from me. And he doesn't have any food. So and I don't know what to do. So that's the hint that I'm going to give to the storekeeper. And so as a result, the storekeeper says, Yaakov can't benefit from Esav directly, but I can now that I know that Esav's really worried about Yaakov, so so the storekeeper can now give to Yaakov some food, and now he can go back to Esav and collect payment. And so, God willing, this should be the case, and we should end up having the peace between Yaakov and Esav in this way. Anyway, Haya Bezo Livnos, or we can have a situation where the person has a house to build, Gedero Ligdor, a fence to build, Sadeo Liktsor, a field to harvest, Holich Eitzel HaPoelim. So Esav can again go to the workers and say, V'omer Ish Ploni Mudar Mimeni Hana. This person is forbidden to borrow to benefit from me. And I don't know what to do because the guy's needs is desperate for workers. And so the workers understand what is being told to them, and they go and work for the person. And then they can go back to Esav and get paid from Esav. Now the Tosfos and Rush here say that when we say that Yaakov has nothing to eat, or needs to build these fences, etc. The point is that these are extreme situations. The trick that is being done here is okay in basically all situations. It is not only in the narrow situation, and the reason is that not only the literal words, but even the figurative words. It is not a great hint, right? It's not like the hint of even I can't get into my room, can you send somebody else to help me? That's even more of a hint. So the point is that this is a very far hint, and so as a result, Tosfos and the Rush both explain that in fact this would be permitted even in a non-extreme situation. But now let's talk about cases where only in a more extreme situation it would be permitted. So hayu mahalchim b'derech ve'ein lo ma yochel. If they're traveling on the road, if again now Yaakov and Esav are traveling on a road, nozein le'echad l'shum matana. So what can they do? So Esav can give to Mark, who happens to be traveling with them, and so Mark will then say, "Oh, listen, I know Yaakov." I don't know. Let's see. Where do you want to travel?
Well, think about it.
How about Florida? We'll go to Florida, okay? Or we'll go to Israel. We'll go to Israel. So we're going to Israel. Yaakov, Esav, and Mark are going to Israel, and all of a sudden, Yaakov has nothing to eat, and Esav's not allowed to give him food to eat because Yaakov's not allowed to benefit from him. So what will Esav do? Esav will give the food to Mark, and Mark, being the nice person that he is, he'll give the food to Yaakov. Okay, and then as a result, Yaakov will be able to benefit from Mark. Well, 1 second. What happens if it's just Yaakov and Esav? If Mark isn't there with them, you should be with them. But if you're not with them, what are they going to do? So then, miniach al hasela o al hagader. So then, what Esav can do is he can put the food that Yaakov needs to eat on a rock or on a fence, and he can say, "V'omer harei hein mufkarin l'chol mi sheyachbos," that this food is hefker. It belongs to anybody who wants it, and I don't own it any longer. V'hala notel v'ochel, and then Yaakov can take it and eat it. The Rabbi Yossi oser, but Rabbi Yossi says this is not permitted. So let's dive into why Rabbi Yossi says it's not permitted. So we're going to offer two explanations for Rabbi Yossi. The first is going to be accepted, and the second is going to be, the first is going to be rejected, and the second is going to be accepted. So Rabbi Yochanan is going to explain my time with the Rabbi Yossi. What's the reasoning for Rabbi Yossi? Why does he not allow Esav to put the food on a rock and call it Hefker, and then let Yaakov take it? Why doesn't he allow that? So must be kasavar hefker b'matana. He thinks that hefker is like a present. Now, what's the nature of a present? If I want to give this mask, which is not a very good present, I admit, if I want to give this mask to Stan as a present, and I put it down over here, okay, I know it's kind of junk, but anyway, well, we understand that it's we'll pretend that this is a beautiful present, and so we're gonna exactly. So I put it down over here. And until Stan picks it up, it still belongs to me.
Wow.
And so as a result, only when Stan picks it up, that's when the present transfers. And so what Rabbi Yossi thinks is that the same thing works with Hefker. If I say that that this mask is Hefker, what I'm really saying is anybody can come and pick it up as a present from me. But until somebody picks it up, it still belongs to me. Okay, so that's what Rabbi Yossi understands. And so if it still belongs to me, then you can understand why the trick doesn't work in our Mishnah. Because if I put my food down, if Esav puts the food down until Yaakov picks it up, even though Esav says it's Hefker, it still belongs to him. All that Hefker means is that anybody can pick it up as a present. It doesn't mean that it's left his possession. On the other hand, what would the rabbi say? What would the Tanakama say in our Mishnah? The Tanakama would say in our Mishnah that no, Hefker is its own category. Hefker is a separate category from where I put down a present for Stan. When I put it down as a present for Stan, I want to maintain ownership because I want to make sure that only Stan picks it up. But when I make something Hefker, it goes out of my possession and into a class of ownerless things. And so as a result, that's why, according to the Tanakama, it works, because I no longer own the food, or Esav no longer owns the food when he puts it down. So Mamatana ad asya merishus nosim l'rishus mikabel. So and now the Gemara explains that when you're talking about a gift, it doesn't leave the hands of the giver until it goes into the possession of the receiver. So af hefker ad asya l'rishus socha, until the hefker has become the possession of the person who picks it up, it still belongs to the person who put it down. So now, Masiv Rabbi Abba. So Rabbi Abba asked a question, and then he's going to answer his own question. V'hala nota v'ocha. 1 second. We have a brisa. We have a brisa that says that if one puts something down and makes it ownerless, Rabbi Yossi Oser. So Rabbi Yossi. So we have a brisa that talks about our Mishnah. And again, Rabbi Yossi says that it's forbidden to put the food down and make it ownerless. And Rabbi Yossi, Amasai, when is it that I say that you can't put it down and use that as a method of letting Yaakov benefit from it? Bisman shenidro kodem lehefkero. If the neder that prohibited Yaakov from benefiting from Esav was made before Esav puts the food down and makes it hefker. So when the neder already exists, so then the food was already prohibited, and so as a result, when Esav puts it down, it's going to remain prohibited. But if aval, and as we turn to men gimel amabet, aval im haya hefkero kodam lenidro. If on the other hand, the declaration of hefker happened before he made the neder. So again, Esav and Yaakov are traveling on the road, and Esav puts down some food and makes it hefker. And then he says, Yaakov, you cannot benefit from me, and he makes a neder to that effect. So because he put down the food ahead of time, Rabbi Yossi says that's okay because he didn't own it. Well, 1 second, you just said that, Rabbi Yochanan just said that until somebody else picks it up, when Esav makes the food hefker, it still belongs to him. So why should it matter whether the neder was made before Esav made the food hefker or after he made the food hefker? Okay. If you're telling me that the food that Esav makes hefker still belongs to him until Yaakov picks it up, Mali nidro kodem lehefkeru, Mali hefkeru kodem lenidro. What do I care which comes first? What do I care whether the neder came first or the hefker came first? The problem is that it still belongs to Esav, and when he made the neder, and so as a result, it should be prohibited. So who mosiv la, who mishani la? So Rabbi Abba asked the question, and he's going to answer the question. Because why? Kol hanoder ein daito al mashe hefker. Because look, again, this was a principle that we saw in our Mishnah. What matters when a person makes a neder? What matters when a person makes a neder is what's in their mind. If what's in their mind is that they are not including what they all just made hefker, well then, even though they might own it technically, of course they're not intending to cover it. So that's totally an okay answer. So that would allow us to have a possibility. So Masiv Rava now challenges Rabbi Abba's explanation, and he says, listen, we have another concept. And so we're going to give you an introduction into this other concept. And so let's take a look at this other concept. So before we get into Rava's question, we need to review the law of deathbed gifts. If God forbid somebody is on their deathbed, we're going to have two categories of gifts. If the person gives everything away, and then we'll assume that let's start with what happens if the person dies. So if the person gives everything away and then the person dies, all those gifts that he gives on his deathbed are valid gifts, and it all goes away. But what happens if, thank God, the person recovers? So what happens now? This person has given all his things away, and now he's back to healthy. So the rabbis recognized that that could happen, and realized that what is the gifts, the intention of the person when he's giving the gift is really only if he dies. Okay, so now what the rabbis did is they realized there are two different categories of situations. If a person gives everything away, well then if the person dies, clearly his intention, if the person doesn't die, then clearly his intention was not to give it everything away if he was going to live. If he knew he was going to live, he wouldn't have done it. So as a result, all of the gifts that he gives to everybody are all null and void. On the other hand, if the person is on their deathbed and they just give a small gift, or they give part of their assets away, but they retain other assets, well then the fact that they retained other assets shows that he recognized that he might survive, and shows that in fact he intended this gift to be a valid gift. Okay, so now that we have that distinction, let's understand Rava's question. So Mesiv Rava asked the following: Mikta san larishon. If person on the deathbed says some of the assets are going to person number one, v'chulan l'sheni, and then he says, you know what, all of them are going to number two. What did he mean? Did, when he say all of them are going to number two, did he undo his gift to number one? Or was he saying, no, my gift to number one was my gift, and when I said all of my assets are to number two, it meant everything else? Well, let's take a look and see how our this brisa understands it. What does it say? Rishon kana, sheni lo kana. The first person number one, gets the gift, and person number two does not. So what does that imply? It implies that that this brisa is saying that when a person says something about person number one, and then says something about person number two, their intention is to undermine what they had said about person number one. So even though the person on the deathbed had said that they were going to give some of their possessions to person number one, when the person then says all of my possessions are for person number two, their intention is to retract their gift to person number one. Mm-hmm. And why is that important? Because now the gift to number two is not part of the gift to number one. It's not that you combine the two and he's giving everything away, and so all of the gifts become null and void, but rather the only gift that becomes null and void is the gift to person number two, because the person got better. But the gift to person number one, which was only a partial gift, our Brisa says that the person number one gets to keep it. So why is that relevant to our story? Because what was the situation that Rabbi Yochanan talked about? Rabbi Yochanan was saying that if the person and especially as modified by Rabbi Abba, that the situation is the following: that when I put this down, when Esav put down the food and said it was hefker, if he did it before he made the neder, then Yaakov would be able to benefit from this food. But the problem is that we see from this brisa that if I make a neder that prohibits all my stuff or that gives all my stuff, my intention is everything. It is not meant to exclude even the stuff that I made hefker if I have any rights left to it. And so if according to Rabbi Yochanan, who's saying that Rabbi Yossi says that there are rights that he has left to it, that would be inconsistent with this brisa, because this brisa says that when you say all of something, you mean all of it, and you mean even the things that you have just a little bit of a right to, like something that you made hefker, if you're following Rabbi Yochanan's understanding. And so as a result, Rava says that we have to reject Rabbi Yochanan's explanation, and he offers his own. So Ella Amar Rava, Hainu Taima de Rabbi Yossi. What's the reason that Rabbi Yossi says in our Mishnah that that it is prohibited for Esav to put the food down on a stone and say that it's hefker? It's because Gzeira Mishum Matanas Beis Choron. It's because of the decree that the rabbis made as a result of the gift of Beit Choron. So what is the gift of Beit Choron? So let's talk about that for 2 minutes, and we'll see it again, God willing, in a few days. But here's the story. Okay, we will be back on tomorrow, and I'll tell you the topic that we're going to begin with tomorrow. We're going to talk more about hefker. So now the story is the following: Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Abraham is the grandfather, Yitzchak is the father, Yaakov is the son. Yaakov is getting married. Baruch Hashem, it's wonderful. He's getting married. And Yitzchak is going to throw the party. And Yitzchak wants to invite Abraham to the party. Yeah, it's wonderful. Except there's a problem. Because at some point, somebody made a neder that caused Abraham to not be able to benefit from Yitzchak. So now what does Yitzchak do? Yitzchak goes over to Esav and he says, listen, Esav, I want to invite Abraham to the wedding. So what am I going to do? Actually, I guess I should say Yishmael to leave it parallel. So Yitzchak goes over to Yishmael, his half brother, and he says, listen, Yishmael, I'm going to give the entire party to you. And that way, when Abraham comes to the party, he's not coming to my party. He's not benefiting from me, and which would be prohibited. He's going to benefit from you. So what does Yishmael say? This is very not nice. Yishmael says, oh, if you're giving me the entire party, I want to give it all to the Beit HaMikdash. He wants to give it all to the Beit HaMikdash. So as soon as he does that, Yitzchak says to him, what do you mean? I gave you this party for my son's wedding. How can you give it all to the Beit HaMikdash? I don't understand. And so the rabbi said, you know what? Clearly, Yitzchak's gift of the party to Yishmael is not a good gift. Wow. And as a result, Abraham is still not allowed to go to the wedding. And so that's the story of Beit Choron. And so that's the story here, that what we're saying is, what Rabbi Yossi is saying in our Mishnah is, listen, this gift can't possibly be a good gift. And so as a result, when it's so clear that it's not a valid action, so then it's not going to work. And we're not going to let it work. And even if technically, maybe from a biblical perspective, it might work, the rabbis are going to say, we're not going to let it work. We don't want people to use that kind of level of trickery to get out of their oaths. So God willing, tomorrow, so this is a relatively short day, but God willing, tomorrow, we will talk more about this concept of hefker, of when something becomes ownerless. And so if you're interested in that, please stay tuned to tomorrow's daf.
Indeed.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.